In this third video in the Python Shells series, we're going to explore the relationships that occur between models and how to handle that within the Python shell. We're going to walk through this carefully, and I think it will really help you understand how this works. I want to point out that if we go back to the PowerPoint slides from one of the previous videos, we're going to rely on this database here, the employee and the department. If you remember, an employee could be in one department, a department can have many employees. We're going to talk about that. We're also going to use this data to illustrate how this works in within the shell. So let me go back over to VS Code, and let me get into code here. There we go. Now the model that I have presented here is your models.py file. I've modified this from the previous video to illustrate the PowerPoint slide that I just showed you. We have department now, we have a department class, and we also have a magic method for that department class. And we have the employee class, which has been, I've added the department now, so an employee can be in a department. You'll notice this is a department object from the department table. It's a foreign key. Consistent with database concepts. That is what, of course, creates that one-to-many relationship between the two. An employee can be in one department, but because there's a foreign key now, an employee departments can have many employees. The magic method I want to point out here is very important, because if you don't have a magic method with the str, the objects, when you print out an object in the shell, it'll just appear as a generic thing like object or something. It doesn't really help you much. But by adding the magic method, you can specify how that object and what is displayed when the object is printed. So this will display the department name. I also want to point out the spaces here before the DEF. Very important. Remember, this is indented as under the class, which indicates it's a part of the class, the department class. If you don't indent this, it will not work. So make sure you do indent this inside the class. Don't put it out here in the left-hand margin. Okay. So I ran the migrations. I can only run this once. If I run this once, then it will reset and you won't be able to see it. So I left it here. But you'll notice that when I run the migrations after I save the models.py file, it indicates that the migrations will create a model for department. It'll also create a model for employee. I reset everything. Yours will differ a little bit because you're just adding the foreign key. To commit the migrations, we could run, of course, migrate. But what's interesting is we can also do this. I can say Python manage.py, and I can say SQL migrate HR00, and I have to go into the file to see what the number is. Mine is 001. Yours probably maybe 002 at this point because I did some resetting. If I do that, though, you'll see the SQL, and I wanted to point this out because I pointed out that you're using this language in Django, but what's really getting generated is SQL, and your book points out that you can see the SQL. Now, we don't cover this part of SQL in 330. We don't. This is called the data definition language part of SQL, where you actually create database objects. But you can see that this code is very SQL-ish. You're creating the table, the HR department table, as well as the HR employee table, along with the keys and all of the related information. Notice also, by the way, that we specified that the type for last name was going to be a char field in our data up here. What's being implemented is a varchar. Now that doesn't seem like a big deal, a varchar of 50, but it is, because what Django did is it picked the correct char type for the database that we were implementing. If this had been SQL Server or had Oracle and they used a different char type, Django would have adapted that for us. So we only, again, ever have to run this particular model. Even if we change our databases, Django will fix it for us. So it's a really cool feature of Django. I know it doesn't seem like it's that big of a deal, but it can be really huge in a real-life situation. Okay, so now that we have this taken care of, let's go in. We've run this migration. Let's enter some data. And so I'm going to use the DB browser for that. You can use the approach that your book talks about to create objects, but I think this illustrates it a little bit better. If you remember in PowerPoint rather, that we have both employee and we have a department table. But employee depends on department, and this is important. I get this question a lot when we start dealing with databases. Employee has a department object, but department does not have an employee object. For that reason, you cannot just enter employees now. You have to first enter the departments that the employees will be in. So it's important we start with department and then move on to employee. So the first thing I'm going to do is change this now. I'm going to open up my database, go out here, and I'll go out and open this. And I need to choose the correct database, of course. And let me see here. Let me try this one more time. Open database. And let me make sure I'm in the right directory, project, and DB3. All right, well, oh, you know what? Maybe I didn't run the migrations. That's why. Easy thing to do. So let's go through and actually say, I was so wrapped up in the SQL. Let's run the migrate. We see migrate. This will create the database objects. And you'll notice, for example, that some of the things that we did here, some of it was authentication, but there was also HR. So there's a variety of things that were created. I just want to point that out. And let's now go back to the DB browser. So we should be able to now get into the appropriate table. So now I'm going to say open database. Let's go back to that DB3 Lite. Hopefully that's there now. And you'll notice now that we can actually browse. You'll notice there are two HR tables. There's HR underscore department and HR underscore employee. HR, again, name of the application. Department is the name of the class. Employee is the name of the class. So let's go to the department and let's add in some department. So we can say new record, and let's be consistent. So the first one is marketing. Okay. And I'm going to write the changes, and now I'm going to add a new table, a new record rather. And the second one was logistics. Okay, and write the changes. That goes into, and we're going to add a new record. Third one was sales. You'll notice that I am not entering the primary key value. It is entering it for me, 1, 2, 3, because that's what a auto increment primary key does. And then now I'm going to add my last record, which was HR. And we're going to use HR quite a bit, so it's important. HR. Write changes. All right, so now we have our databases. We can confirm that by going back now to the shell, and we can go into the shell. And I can say from HR.models import department, and we can say department.objects.all, and that'll print all of the objects. And you can see that again it uses now the name of the department when we print out the department, so we can actually see what the different objects contain. So that seems to be working pretty well. So let's go back to the DB browser and let's enter some employees. So I'll change my table to employee, and let's add a new record. Oops, don't want to do that. New record. New record. There we go. All right, and let's do last name Robinson, first name Lorraine. This is my wife's maiden name, by the way, and she's in HR. Now, one of the things when I tab into this, notice this up and down arrow comes in. If I pull this down, notice it now gives me the numbers that are valid. That's that dependency between the tables. That's why we have a department lookup table. It enforces referential integrity. We can now only enter the values for Lorraine that are valid. And since HR is 4, let's enter that and we can write the changes. Let's enter a new record. All right, and let's enter in my son's name. And he was in sales, I believe, which was 3. So we'll pull that down 3, and write changes. And we'll go up here, new record, and now we're going to enter in my daughter's name. Her last name's not Madison, but that's just all right. And all right, and now she was in, if I remember correctly, she was in marketing. So choose that. Write changes. New record. And we're going to put in, this is actually my father's name, Angelo. Also happens to be my middle name, by the way. And 4, he was in sales, right? Or he was in HR rather. And then new record, last one, which is my mother's name, Anne. And again, she was in 3, which is sales. And then rate changes. Okay, so now we have our date. We have the information in our database. Oh, I never made this change here. So let me go. Notice that we can enter a value of null because we specified that. Remember, in the primary key, we can leave that as null. But I do want Angela to be in actually 4. So let's put that in there. And let's write changes again. But notice we could put in a null in there because we did say that the null value was true and blank was true. So we could do that in that particular situation. Okay, so let's go back now. Let's go back to VS Code. And let's import the, instead of department, let's also import the employee. And we should be able to say employee.objects.all. And you'll see that now we have the employees. Now, how do we check what department an employee is in? Well, remember, employee has certain columns. So if I say, for example, I could bring in one particular employee, I could say employee.objects.get, and I could say ID equals 1. And notice that stores that now in the value of E. And if I print that, that is Lorraine Robinson. That is an object. And that is very important because an object is a very complex thing. It has a lot of different features and things that we can use, a lot of different methods, for example. If I say, for example, E.lastName, I can print Lorraine's last name by saying E.lastName. I, of course, can say E.firstname as well, and it will print. And if I don't know Lorraine's primary key, I can say E.id. And notice that even though we didn't specify that, again, Django generated it for us automatically, and Lorraine has an ID of 1. Similarly, we can also say E.department. That was the name of the column. It's right there at the above of the screen there. You can see that that prints, but notice it is not like the other printouts that I did. It's not a string. It's got those brackets around it, which indicates it's an object, and it uses that magic method for department to print it out. This indicates that it isn't just a column, it's an object. It contains all of the information that is relevant to department. So I can say, for example, E.department. Since department is an object, I can also say .id, and that will tell me that Lorraine is in the department that has a department of 4, an ID of 4, which is, of course, HR. But I can do even one better. I can use the department name. I can say E.department.department name. And that will tell me that Lorraine is in HR. So in effect, this navigates. This is the easy way. This is the easiest way to do it. Because if you go back to the PowerPoint slide, this in effect goes from the employee to the department. We can navigate from a specific employee, and we can find that employee's department simply by using the dot notation and leveraging the fact that this employee class has a department object. So if we want to know the employee's department, we can simply say the employee object .department name, and it will navigate in effect from this side of the relationship to here. Now, to go the other way is a little bit more difficult, but there's a specific format for it, and we're going to go walk through that. If I have, for example, a specific department, so let's say D equals department .objects.get, and let's say ID equals 4, or we could even say, for example, we could say department name equals HR, and that way we know which department we're getting. If I do that and we say D, it'll print that it's HR, and I of course can say D.department name or D.id, and that will, whoops, how about D.id? There we go. Now that'll tell us that D is a department object. We can navigate from the one to the many side by using what's called set notation. Now set notation is a little confusing, but it always follows the same approach. Take the object on the one side, and this is department, and now you're going to go over to the many side. Okay, so we're going to say dot. Now use the name of the many side class, but make it lowercase. So we're going to say employee, and this is why, by the way, your class names for your table should always be uppercase. This is another convention. Class names are always uppercase, but object names are always lowercase. Then say underscore. Sorry about that, my dog. Apparently there's another dog walking by. Underscore set. This is always the same format. So you're going from the one side to the many side. You say the one side dot employee, which is on the many side, underscore set, and then you want to get all of the objects that are associated with it. So we say dot all, and if you do that, it will give us all the employees in the HR department. and you'll notice these are the employees that had an ID of 4. I can even set that equal to, I can say, for example, employees equals, and then d dot employee underscore set dot all. And if I say employees, that will give us all the employees in that particular that are in HR. And if I want to, I can use that now. So for example, in Python, I could say for, and we're going to do this type of thing a little bit later in the semester. I could say for employee in employees. This allows me to iterate through the employee list. And now I say 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces, and I can say print, and I can use employee. I can say employee dot last name plus to concatenate. Now, employee last name is a string, so I can say comma. I don't have to use an str conversion or anything because it's already a string. And then I can say employee dot first name. And now when I have a blank line, I hit return. You'll notice it prints out and iterates through. Those are the employees that are in the HR department. I can also do this. I can say, I can go back here, and I just use the up arrow, by the way. The up arrow is a really great tool for you to learn if you haven't started using that. It just saves so much time. Dot ID plus. Now ID is a integer, so I can't just concatenate it. I have to convert it. So I'll say str. I have to convert it to a string. And let's add a little bit of formatting here. So we'll say plus, and then we'll put a colon and a space. And then now we can concatenate that and hit return. And you'll notice we can see now the employee numbers as well as the employees that are associated with that particular HR department. So this is how you navigate from one to many, many to one. It is a little bit easier to go from many to one than one to many, but you just have to remember that set notation. If you remember the set notation, it always is the same format. The employee that is on the one, or the object that is on the one side, dot, then the name of the class that is on the many side, again, lowercase, I know that's a little different, underscore set dot all will return all the employees that are associated with that particular object on the one side. Hope this helps. Thank you. Bye-bye.